Incompatible, it don't matter though.
Guys, I gotta get a move on with this. Am I the only one who gets sucked into the Instagram wormhole? I can't quite get the hang of Twitter. Like, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know really how to get engaged with it. I've picked up TikTok only because work-related reasons, yet I can't figure out TikToks. Instagram, not very good at it. I don't have a lot of followers, but I feel like, I know it pretty well and I'm enjoying the things I'm figuring out. But if I get sucked into Instagram, I'm not going to get the rest of my stuff done. And so we're jumping in to the Library of Souls, which is the third book in the Miss Peregrine's trilogy. Although technically it's a sextant, I think, because there's 6 books in the series. But this is the third in the original trilogy. And I have to say, I remember not liking it very much my first read through. And I think it's because there weren't a lot of new peculiars introduced. That has always been one of my favorite parts of the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series, is all of the creative ways that Ransom Riggs has come up with using pictures and integrating them into his stories. In those boring pictures that still I think are kind of boring when he uses them, I applaud his attempts at creativity in the way he used them. Personally, I would be picking as many interesting pictures as possible rather than some things that should have been burned because who cares? But that I remember being very clearly being the reason that I didn't like Library of Souls as much, just because it didn't introduce anything new per se. However, I didn't hate it. I didn't dislike it. I mean, hate's a strong word. I don't think I hated it the first time around, but it didn't stand out to me. And I didn't get the same vibe this time through. There are some things that I don't understand. So I'm going to get ahead of myself here. If you know anything about the series, you know that Miss Peregrine has been kidnapped. And basically, books 2 and 3 are about saving her. So my problem comes in with Jacob, who is the main character. And he met Miss Peregrine in the first novel. He knew her for like 2, maybe 3 weeks before she got kidnapped. Yet he refers to her as a mother figure in his life. He talks about her like she means something to him when he doesn't really know her that well. How can she mean that much to him when they haven't had much interaction? Okay, maybe it's because he doesn't have a great relationship with his mother or his parents in general. Like, they just aren't that close. But I did think it strange that he would be like, we've got to rescue Miss P, and Miss P is like one of the most important people in my life. And I mean, that's not actually what he says, but it's the gist of it. And I was like, I could understand the peculiar children feeling this way because she's raised them or she's taken care of them for 80 odd years. But you? The last time you actually spoke to her, she was giving you an ultimatum as to you either stay or go. Like, if you leave, you're not coming back, and if you stay, you're not going back. So I thought it was strange that he had this attachment to her. I mean, I could see getting her back as being important to him. But viewing her as someone so important and special to his life, yeah. But anywho, Library of Souls picks up where Hollow City ends, and that is with most of the peculiar children being kidnapped by the Whites, except for Jacob and Emma, and then this peculiar dog Addison, who he's kind of annoying, but they decide that they need to rescue the peculiar children. Via Addison, they track them down to this dock where they meet Sharon, who, if you know anything about Greek mythology, is the keeper of the river Styx. Obviously a play on word, but I thought that was quite clever. But Sharon is like 7 feet tall, and he says, hey, I can't tell you if anybody has come through here. However, I can take you somewhere. So he brings them to Devil's Acre, which is kind of this lawless, peculiar loop. Emma, Jacob, and Addison escape from him because he's like, you stay here, I've got to go talk to someone. And they're like, should we really trust him? They go off in search of answers of their own. And this leads them to essentially the entrance to the White Camp. But the bridge does not go all the way across, so they're thwarted by a hollow that Jacob can't control, which that's something that I also don't quite understand, is his inability to get a hold on his ability, his peculiarity. I understand it can take time to master a peculiarity, and he's only known he's been peculiar for about a month. But to me, it seems really obvious the common denominators as to when he's been able to connect with hollows and get them to do his bidding. And so it got a little frustrating. I know it's all about momentum and tension and suspense, but I was just like, Jacob, you feel a little bit useless to me right now. Anywho, he encounters this hollow gas that's guarding the bridge. So he and Emma are thrown back, well, as is Addison, but then a truck full of whites and peculiars comes to the bridge and are helped across by the hollow, and Addison jumps onto the bottom of this truck. Now they're on their own without Addison, and I'm like, why would Addison do that? What did he think he could accomplish on his own? In any case, Emma and Jacob, they're hurt. They are brought back to this home owned by this guy named Bentham. We learn, spoiler, Bentham is Miss Peregrine's brother. She has two brothers, and both of them kind of went to the dark side. Like, they are part of the group that blew up a loop, like collapsed a loop in their attempts to become super peculiars or rule the world. And that is how hollows were created, hollows and whites. And so we're like, oh my gosh, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And he's trying to tell them, I had it all wrong, and now I'm trying to redeem myself. He nurses him back to health with the help, and this one always creeps me out, with a peculiar named Mother Dust. Her peculiarity is being able to use her body as a natural healant. So it's like she rubs her fingers together and she kind of rubs herself away and uses that dust to heal people's wounds. So she basically rubs herself away. So eventually she loses her fingers and then her arms, and like she can basically kill herself by helping others. It grosses me out every time. Great idea, but it makes me cringe. You get this feeling that something, like information, is being withheld. And this is when we learn that Bentham had known Abe, who is Jacob's grandfather. Abe had agreed to let Bentham experiment on him. Something that we have encountered in this book is something called ambro, which is like, it's a drug, and it is comprised of bits of peculiars. Like, they're bits of their souls, and you pour it into your eyes and you get this essential superhuman strength for a finite period of time. And we learn it stems from Bentham because he and Call, the other brother, the experiments going on in the loop were not as heinous as we were led to believe. And this is me seeing Ransom Riggs developing his world, where maybe he had a vague idea as to why hollow gas were created and where whites come from. And then the further into his series he got, he realized he needed more detail. From Bentham, we're learning about their experiments and that maybe they weren't as heinous as we thought. And that eventually Call took it too far. So Bentham, seeing this, is like, I gotta get out of here. But anyways, he had begun experimenting on peculiars to see if he could kind of extract part of their soul and sort of spread it around, like give people other peculiar abilities. And in doing so, Abe agreed. But in doing so, it robbed Abe, as it would of any peculiar, of their full peculiar strength. I had a little struggle here, which leads more into the next book, A Map of Days, than it really does with this book, but that is something I had completely forgotten, that Abe had let Bentham experiment on him. This is essentially why Abe left the peculiar home, because he felt that his diminished ability to sense and control hollows endangered his friends, and so he left and gets involved in the war, and then he comes over to the States, and there we go, Jacob's born. I'm not going to get too much into A Map of Days because I try to reserve spoilers for the specific books. Another thing that essentially what all the experiments and whatnot had started with and boils down to between Call and Bentham is the ability to travel through loops fast. They discovered a system in which if they visited loops, they could take a piece of that loop and then connect them. In Bentham's house are doors leading to rooms full of various loops. However, Call had him destroy this Panloopticon and then rebuild a second version in his own compound. So Call has one, but Bentham doesn't. Bentham has figured out that if he has a hollow, he can get it working. Like the machine can work because of whatever the hollow can give it. So Emma and Jacob are recruited to go get a hollow. They are accompanied by Sharon. And this is something that I thought was quite clever or quite sweet, maybe. Or it was definitely a different twist on what I'd expected to be happening with Jacob and his hollow abilities. We know hollows as evil, vicious creatures. And I know I have the completely wrong picture in my head as to what a hollow looks like. For me, a hollow is this giant black, like an ink spot with legs, and then has the tongues. But it's kind of cute. Like, that's what I have in my head. And I know it's far more grotesque in real life. But Jacob has formed a connection with a particular hollow. And so this particular hollow, we start to kind of like it, to feel for it. Like it's almost like a dog, a little puppy. And when Sharon had brought Emma and Jacob into Devil's Acre, this hollow had tagged along. However, Jacob, in an attempt to get away from some people, he had thought that he accidentally got the hollow killed, but it turns out that the hollow had not been killed. And this is a question I have. Hologhasts are invisible to everybody except for particular people, which is why Jacob is peculiar, because he can see hollows. So how was anybody able to find this hollow in the river where Jacob thought he got it killed? Unless there's so much muck and junk in the river that it coated it to the extent that you could see the outline. Don't quite understand this unless maybe there's some other peculiar who can see hollows. But they are informed that this hollow has been pulled from the river and is now basically at this fighting den. Jacob has to go retrieve it. This is where they learn about Ambro. This is where we learn that Sharon, who always wears his hood, had been an Ambro addict. And the problem with being an Ambro addict is it melts your face. And so we always knew there was something creepy about Sharon, but we didn't know what it was. And now we do, that he basically has a melted face. They are able to rescue the hollow and bring it back to the Panloopticon, only for Jacob to realize that Bentham kind of lied to him about whether or not this machine would harm the hollow. I don't quite know how it harms the hollow. All I know is that it does kind of extract blood from it in a sense, and that is what makes the machine run. In my head, the hollow's riding an exercise bike, and this is what's powering the machine. Obviously, I'm wrong. They use the machine to get into Call's compound, which is another question for me. Because if Jacob sees the one hollow helping the truck across, can't he put two and two together and say, maybe I'll do the same thing? Because he's getting a better handle on how to control hollows. They sneak into the compound. They discover a lot of disturbing things, experiments being done on peculiars. They finally are able to find their friends who are relatively okay. Then they need to find the Imbrans because they've learned that what Call wants to do is locate the Library of Souls. The Library of Souls, to most Peculiars, is a fairy tale. However, we've learned that tales of Peculiar are based, in fact. And the Library of Souls is, in fact, this library of souls. Sorry, I know I keep repeating myself, but it's very self-explanatory. The idea is that it is kind of where peculiar souls go until they need a new vessel, and the librarians have this ability to know who needs what. However, at some point in time, somebody discovered this library and discovered that they can use the souls for themselves and empower themselves by using these souls. And so this huge war broke out. Eventually, it disappeared. And Call wants the Library of Souls. What had happened the first time in his attempt to find it was what caused that initial loop collapse. He had somehow gotten a number of Imbrans to do something. It didn't work out, but he's like, okay, so now I need to get more Imbrans. So this is why he's kidnapping Imbrans rather than just killing them. Emma and Jacob believe that they found the Imbrans only to essentially be caught by Call. They're trapped in the room with the Imbrans and are attacked by a hollow. Mother Dust had given them a finger, which I think is quite clever, the way that Ransom Riggs keeps saying that they're giving people the finger. But Jacob is acknowledging the losing battle. For some reason, he cannot control this hollow. My pause is because I'm still getting annoyed that he's kind of worthless. I'm ready for him to have a handle on his ability, to have little by little picked up on what works, what doesn't work, what he can and can't do, and how he can and can't do it. And he just, fruitless efforts, he just yells a lot, honestly. But he has the remainder of the finger. He grinds it into powder. The hollow basically falls back into its den with a bunch of other hollows, and they're all put under the spell of Mother Dust, because not only does it heal you, but it puts you to sleep. It's like an opiate, essentially. Then Jacob has this dream where he wakes up as a hollow and everybody's afraid of him, only for him to realize that he's dreaming, but he's not dreaming. Like, he has embodied another hollow. And that's when he wakes up and he realizes, like, the dream he had was actually another hollow coming out of this space and approaching people and scaring them. And so he's like, well, I'm now one with the hollows. He leads his army of hollows to destroy all of the whites and to capture Call. They're not entirely successful. It's because most of the hollows get killed. And then Call kidnaps Miss Peregrine and uses her as bait, uses her to get Jacob to acquiesce to his demands, which is to join him at the Library of Souls. Because, and this is something I don't quite understand. Riggs tried to explain it, but for me, I'm still a little bit like, huh? And in a discussion with Mother Dust, she reveals that Peculiars have abilities, but just because you have this ability doesn't mean it's the only thing you're capable of. And so Jacob, even though he is a hollow, not necessarily a hollow hunter, but even though he has this ability to see and control hollows, he can do so much more. He's meant for so much more. He's capable of so much more. Something about him and his ability means that he would be a good librarian, which means that when they get to the Library of Souls, he can see the jars of souls, whereas normal Peculiars can't. And this is what Call wants from him. Call wants him to lead him to the bowels of the Library of Souls, where the oldest, most powerful souls reside. He ends up inhabiting or ingesting a soul, And Bentham, who realizes that Call's intentions are very selfish, double-crossed Jacob and Miss Peregrine because Miss Peregrine rejected his claims of being a changed man and goes on to Call's side, but then after seeing Call's true intentions, decides maybe that's not the best side to be on. So he gives Jacob, and if I call him Adam, please know I mean Jacob. I don't know why I want to call him Adam, I just do. He gives Jacob this recipe, formula, spell to collapse a loop. He ingests a soul, and he and Call grow massive and have this like epic Mighty Morphin Power Rangers battle, you know, with the Megazords or whatever. The Imbrans collapse the loop with Bentham and Call inside. Everybody else escapes. What we learn is that this loop collapse somehow reset the internal clocks of everybody who had been inside. So all of Jacob's friends are now essentially their rightful age. They won't die. Like, they don't have to be in a loop. They can continue to live as normal people without fear of aging forward. But we don't learn that until much later. I guess it's not as much as I thought it was going to be. With the audiobook, this was like another hour's worth of listening. My problem with that was I didn't quite think it was necessary. And a happier ending would have been Jacob and his friends destroy Call. They are safe and they have their happily ever after. And we can just assume things are okay from there. We don't get proper resolution, which is the flaw in my plan. But what Riggs does is everybody gets out, and then Jacob goes back to the present, contacts his parents, and they're at the police station, and chaos is ensuing. And the plan had been for Miss Peregrine to essentially wipe everybody's memories so that kind of Jacob could get off scot-free. And then Jacob realizes that there's more people who would be involved in this because, of course, his parents were probably telling other people something's wrong with Jacob. We gotta go find him. So he decides to not let her wipe their memories. That leads into this really long exposition about life back home, in which his parents don't trust him. He's seen a new psychiatrist and he's just pretty miserable. And then they discover the letters that he's been writing with Emma, only to think that he's making it all up. Like, somehow he's managing to send these letters to himself. Like, he's writing them and then having them fake postmarked from London. So he's coming back from a psychiatrist's office, having just learned that they have contacted a mental health facility, basically an insane asylum, and that at the first open room, Jacob is gonna go stay there, only for them to arrive at the house and see Miss Peregrine and all the children, because he had somehow been able to contact them via email. That's kind of where we end. And I find it to be a dissatisfactory ending. I think it would have been better if we'd started a map of days that way, because there's a lot that I'd forgotten about this book, which is why I love rereading books. But I had forgotten about that ending and how discordant it felt. As much as I disliked all of the trauma he goes through with his parents and the psychiatrist and all that stuff, I do like the way it comes back around to say, oh, well, now I've learned that my friends aren't going to age forward. They can come hang out with me in the real world whenever they want. So I liked that, but I still think it would have been a little bit better, bittersweet, maybe a little bit more open-ended, if we ended with him and his friends escaping the loop and Call dying. It feels more unresolved the way that we end this way, almost like, yes, we're gonna have another book. And for some reason, I had no idea Ransom Riggs was gonna continue the series, and then he did, and I was so excited. But I do feel like he dragged the end on too long because he essentially rehashes everything in the next book anyways. I liked Library of Souls more than I remembered liking it. I can't think of much else to talk about. Oh, actually, there is one more thing. When Jacob and Emma discover their friends, Horace hands Jacob this scarf. Jacob's like, why do I need a scarf? And Horace is just like, just take the scarf. We learn later that the scarf was made out of a bullet resistant wool. Since Horace has nightmares of the future, like he knew that Jacob would need this. Like this would save Jacob's life when Call tries to kill him, tries to shoot him. And my problem with this is the Imbrans are locked in one room and all the peculiar children are locked away elsewhere. And so when Jacob asks how Horace got this scarf, Horace says, I knitted it with the wool that Miss P gave me. How in the world did she sneak him wool and knitting needles? Because I cannot see Call letting any of the Imbrans go to like take a stroll through the compound, much less getting their hands on knitting needles and wool. Like where would they have gotten wool from? That was one thing that I thought was a bit of a stretch. I'm gonna sign off here because it's dinner time, and just don't forget to like and subscribe and comment, let me know you're there. What is your favorite YA series? Do you like fantasy? Have you ever read this series? I will talk to you later. Bye.